I shouldn't have stopped at that gas station. I've been driving long-haul routes for 8 years now, and I thought I'd seen every kind of weird you could encounter on the road. What happened on November 15th, 2023, outside Bakersfield, California, made me realize how wrong I was about what people are capable of when they think no one's watching. My name is Marcus Johnson, and I drive for Midwest Express Logistics out of Kansas City. The load I was carrying that night was bound for Los Angeles. 42,000 pounds of computer components that had to be delivered by 6 a.m. I'd started my drive from Sacramento at 6 p.m., planning to make the run in one shot with a fuel stop around the halfway point. It was 2:47 a.m. when I pulled my 2019 blue Peterbilt 579 into the Shell station on Highway 58, about 15 miles east of Bakersfield. The rain had been coming down steady for the past hour and a half, not gentle California drizzle, but heavy drops that hammered my windshield and turned the asphalt into a black mirror reflecting neon signs and wavering streaks of red, yellow, and green. The station looked normal from the road. Bright fluorescent lights cutting through the darkness like a beacon, a small convenience store attached to the main building, and 2 pump islands with enough clearance for my 75-foot rig. The building was maybe 20 years old, typical highway architecture with beige stucco walls and a red tile roof that had seen better days. Only one other vehicle was there, a beat-up 2015 white Honda Accord with primer spots along the rear quarter panel, parked near the building's side entrance. I maneuvered my rig carefully through the station layout, checking my mirrors for clearances. The pumps were the newer kind with digital displays and credit card readers built into each side. Pump 3 on the far island had the diesel nozzles I needed, positioned so I could pull through without backing up. I aligned my fuel tanks with the pump and killed the engine. The sudden silence was broken only by the drumming of rain on my cab roof, the distant hum of fluorescent lights, and the occasional hiss of air brakes from passing trucks on the highway. Through the convenience store windows, I could see someone moving around inside, a tall, thin figure in what looked like a blue work shirt, restocking shelves behind the counter. I grabbed my fuel card from the visor and stepped down from the cab, immediately feeling the cold November air and mist from rain being blown sideways by the wind. My boots splashed in small puddles as I walked to the pump. The digital display lit up as I approached, prompting me to insert my card. The pump took my company fuel card without issue, displaying "Authorized Select Grade" in green letters. I selected diesel and lifted the heavy nozzle from its cradle. It was one of the newer high-flow types, designed to fill large tanks quickly. I inserted it into my fuel tank and squeezed the handle, hearing the familiar sound of diesel flowing through the lines. 68 gallons takes about 12 minutes at high flow, so I decided to grab coffee and maybe a sandwich while the tank filled. I could see the digital display counting up gallons and dollars as I walked toward the store entrance. The glass door had several stickers advertising lottery tickets, energy drinks, and a rewards program. A small bell chimed as I pushed it open. The interior was what you'd expect from a highway convenience store: 4 aisles of snacks, drinks, and automotive supplies, with a hot food warmer near the counter and 2 coffee stations along the far wall. The smell hit me immediately: stale coffee, industrial disinfectant, and that particular convenience store aroma of processed food and artificial air freshener. "Evening," I said to the clerk behind the counter, trying to be friendly. He looked up from sorting through receipts, a guy maybe 35, 40 years old, about 6'2", with a thin build that made his blue work shirt hang loose. His brown hair was greasy and uncombed, like he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes seemed a little too wide, too focused. His name tag read Kevin, in block letters. "You're out late," he said, not returning my greeting. His voice had an odd quality, slightly nasal, like he was trying too hard to sound casual but couldn't quite manage it. "Just passing through," I replied, heading for the coffee station. "Long night ahead." The coffee looked like it had been sitting in the pot since the Clinton administration, but I'd had worse. I grabbed one of the large foam cups and filled it 3/4 full, leaving room for cream. The coffee was dark and bitter, exactly what I needed to stay alert for the remaining 3 hours to Los Angeles. As I moved to the cream and sugar station, I could feel Kevin watching me. Not just occasional glances you'd expect from a clerk keeping an eye on customers. This was steady, focused attention. When I turned around to head for the food section, he quickly looked away, pretending to arrange cigarette packages behind the counter. The cooler section had the usual selection of pre-made sandwiches, each wrapped in plastic with expiration dates still a day or two away. I grabbed turkey and Swiss on wheat bread, not gourmet, but it would keep me going. I approached the register, and Kevin rang me up with movements that seemed jerky and nervous. "That'll be $8.47, he said, his voice slightly higher than before. I handed him a $10 bill, and when he gave me change, his fingers lingered against mine for just a second too long. His skin was cold and slightly damp, like he'd been sweating despite the cool temperature. "Drive safe out there," he said, and something in his tone made the hair on my neck stand up. It wasn't the usual pleasantry. There was an undercurrent of something else, something that sounded almost like a threat. "Roads can be dangerous at night. Lots of accidents happen when people aren't paying attention to what's around them." The way he emphasized, "What's around them?" sent a chill through me, but I just nodded and headed back outside, eager to get back on the road. The rain had intensified while I was inside, and I had to jog 30 feet from the store entrance to my truck to avoid getting soaked. But as I approached my Peterbilt, I noticed something that made me stop dead. My fuel cap was lying on the ground next to the pump, and diesel was pooling around my feet in a spreading puddle that reflected the overhead lights. The acrid smell was overwhelming, much stronger than it should have been for a normal fill-up. The nozzle was still inserted in my tank, but the handle had been manually triggered and locked in the open position, causing diesel to continue pumping even though my tank was full and overflowing. Fuel was running down the side of my truck in dark streams, spreading across the concrete and flowing towards storm drains. I quickly reached for the nozzle handle and squeezed it to release the automatic lock, then pulled it out. Diesel continued dripping as I hung it back on the pump. The digital display showed 94.7 gallons pumped, nearly 30 gallons more than my tank could hold. Diesel was everywhere. It had pooled under my truck, creating a slick surface that made walking treacherous. The smell was overwhelming, and I knew this represented both a massive environmental hazard and serious fire risk. One spark, one cigarette, one static discharge, and the entire pump island could go up in flames. I'd only been inside maybe 12 minutes, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had properly shut off the pump before going inside. I'd been doing this for 8 years, checking that the nozzle was secure and the pump was off was as automatic as breathing. Someone had deliberately triggered the pump to continue flowing after I'd left. That's when I looked toward the store and saw Kevin standing in the doorway, watching me through the glass. The overhead lights created glare on the windows, but I could still make out his silhouette. Even from 30 feet away, I could see that he was smiling. Not the professional smile of customer service, but something else entirely, something that looked predatory. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called the emergency number posted on the fuel pump. A recorded message answered immediately, directing me through options. I pressed 1 for fuel spills and waited for a live operator. "Shell Emergency Services, this is David. Can you give me your location? I'm at the Shell station on Highway 58, about 15 miles east of Bakersfield," I said, reading the station identification number. "Station number 4457. I've got a major diesel spill at pump 3. Probably 40 or 50 gallons on the ground." "Copy that. Any injuries or immediate fire hazard?" "No injuries, but there's fuel everywhere. Someone tampered with the pump while I was inside." "Understood. I'm dispatching a cleanup crew to your location. They should be there within 45 minutes. Please stay clear of the spill area." I hung up and looked back at the store. Kevin was no longer in the doorway, but I could see him moving around inside, apparently going about normal duties as if nothing had happened. I walked back toward the building, carefully avoiding diesel-slicked areas. The bell chimed again as I entered, and Kevin looked up with exaggerated concern. "Everything okay out there?" he asked. "I thought I smelled something." There's been a major spill at Pump 3, I told him, watching his face carefully. The pump malfunctioned and kept running after I went inside. You need to call this in and put up warning signs. Oh no, he said, but his expression didn't match his words. If anything, he looked pleased, like someone had told him good news. How did that happen? The pumps are supposed to shut off automatically. That's what I'd like to know, I said. The handle was locked open when I came back outside. Someone had to have done that manually. Kevin's smile faltered for just a moment, then he recovered. Well, these old pumps can be finicky sometimes. Mechanical problems, you know? But I knew it wasn't a malfunction. In 8 years of filling up at stations like this, I'd never seen an automatic shutoff fail in a way that would lock the nozzle open and continue pumping. That required deliberate human intervention. I've already called Shell Emergency Services. I continued. They're sending a cleanup crew. You should put out warning cones to keep people away. Kevin moved slowly toward a supply closet, like he was in no hurry to address a potentially serious environmental disaster. He pulled out a couple of orange traffic cones and headed outside. I followed, wanting to keep an eye on what he was doing. He placed the cones in a half-hearted manner around the spill area, but not in positions that would effectively warn approaching customers. If someone came to use adjacent pumps, they could easily step in diesel before noticing the hazard. That's not going to be enough, I told him. You need to rope off this entire pump island. I'm sure it'll be fine, Kevin replied, but he was studying my truck with intensity that had nothing to do with the fuel spill. His eyes moved over license plates, company logos, the configuration of my sleeper cab. Nice rig. Looks like you've got a good setup for long hauls. The comment seemed innocent, but something in his tone made me uncomfortable. There was a possessive quality to how he was looking at my truck, like he was memorizing details for later use. Long haul gets lonely, doesn't it? Kevin moved closer, and I noticed he had something in his hand, what looked like a small electronic device. Sometimes I think about what it would be like, seeing the country, meeting new people. Must be nice having a sleeper cab like that. Like having your whole life right there with you. The way he said it made my stomach turn. There was an implication in his words, a suggestion that he'd been thinking about my personal space, my private life on the road. I should call my dispatcher, I said, pulling out my phone and stepping back. Let them know about the delay. But instead of calling my dispatcher, I opened my camera app and started taking pictures, photos of the spill, of Kevin, of his white Honda, of the pump area. Something told me I was going to need evidence later. Kevin noticed what I was doing and his demeanor changed instantly. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by something that looked like panic. You don't need to do that, he said quickly. It's just a minor spill. These things happen all the time. 40 gallons isn't minor, I replied, continuing to take photos. This is a serious environmental hazard. Kevin walked over to his Honda and popped the hood, claiming he needed to check something. But he wasn't looking at the engine, he was reaching under the hood to retrieve something. When he thought I wasn't watching, I saw him slide a small electronic device from somewhere near the battery into his jacket pocket. That's when everything clicked. The pump malfunction wasn't random, it was deliberate. Kevin had tampered with the pump to keep me here longer, to give him time to do something else. The device he'd retrieved could have been anything. A GPS tracker he'd planned to plant on my truck, a listening device, something worse. I thought about all the questions he'd asked, all the comments about my truck, my route, my sleeping arrangements. This wasn't casual conversation, it was reconnaissance. He'd been gathering information, planning something. I made a decision. Environmental hazard or not, I was leaving. I climbed into my cab and started the engine, the diesel rumbling to life. But as I put the transmission in gear and started to pull away, Kevin appeared at my driver's side window, knocking frantically. You can't leave, he shouted over the engine noise. The cleanup crew isn't here yet. You could be in serious trouble with the EPA. I rolled down my window just a few inches. I'll call it in from the road and come back if they need me. No, you don't understand, Kevin said, and his whole demeanor had changed completely. The fake politeness was gone, replaced by something desperate and dangerous. His eyes were wide, almost manic, and he was breathing heavily. "You have to stay. I need you to stay." The way he said, "I need you to stay," sent ice through my veins. This wasn't about environmental regulations. This was personal, and it was dangerous. I hit the gas and pulled away from the pumps, Kevin running alongside my truck for about 10 yards before falling behind. In my passenger mirror, I watched him sprint back to the white Honda. I had maybe a 30-second head start before he'd be following me. I grabbed my CB radio and switched to channel 19. "Breaker 19, this is Blue Pete eastbound on 58. I've got a situation at the Shell station, mile marker 142. Clerk may be dangerous. Any county mounties in the area might want to check it out." A voice crackled back. "Blue Pete, this is Roadrunner. Copy your transmission." "What kind of situation?" "Guy tampered with my fuel pump, been asking suspicious questions, now he's following me. I'm eastbound toward Bakersfield with company behind me." "Roger that, Blue Pete. I'll call CHP. You got a description?" "White Honda Accord, California plates, older model with primer spots. Driver is tall, thin, brown hair, wearing blue work shirt." "Copy. Stay on channel, Blue Pete. Help's coming." The next 45 minutes were the longest of my driving career. Kevin stayed behind me in the Honda, never getting closer than a quarter mile, but never falling back far enough that I couldn't see his headlights. When I sped up, he sped up. When I changed lanes, he changed lanes. When I slowed down to test his intentions, he slowed down too. At mile marker 127, I saw the most beautiful sight, a California Highway Patrol cruiser parked on the shoulder with radar. I immediately pulled over, hazards flashing, and watched Kevin's Honda drive past at normal speed, like just another traveler heading east. But I'd gotten a clear look at his license plate, 7G4H892. Officer Martinez approached my cab with practiced caution. "Morning. Everything all right? You seemed eager to get my attention." I explained the entire situation, the fuel spill, Kevin's behavior, the device he'd hidden, how he'd followed me. Martinez listened without interrupting, taking notes. "You said he retrieved something from under his hood? Some kind of electronic device. Small, maybe phone-sized. He tried to hide it when he put it in his jacket." Martinez radioed for backup and a supervisor, giving them the license plate number. Within 10 minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived, along with Sergeant Williams. "We're going to check out this station," Williams told me. "Follow us back, but stay in your truck unless we tell you otherwise." The convoy made the trip back in 12 minutes. As we approached, I could see Kevin's Honda was still there, parked in the same spot with the hood still up. But when officers approached the store, they found it empty. The front door was unlocked, lights still on, country music still playing, but no sign of Kevin anywhere. A search of the Honda revealed Kevin's real name from registration documents, Marcus Anthony Webb, with an address in Portland, Oregon. When Williams ran the name, the results were disturbing. "We've got a problem," Williams said. "Marcus Webb has an outstanding warrant in Oregon for stalking and harassment. 2 different cases, both involving women he met through their workplaces." They called for additional units, an AK-19. Behind the convenience store, they found a storage facility. Unit 47 was registered to Marcus Webb, and when they cut the lock, they discovered it had been converted into a makeshift living space with sleeping bag, camping stove, and battery-powered lights. More disturbing were the walls, covered with photographs and detailed information about truck drivers who had stopped at the station over months. Photos of license plates, truck configurations, company logos, and pictures clearly taken without driver's knowledge. My license plate was already written on a notepad, along with planned routes based on previous stops. Webb had been tracking my movements and those of dozens of other drivers, building detailed profiles of potential victims. Detective Sarah Rodriguez arrived to take over. "This is much bigger than simple stalking," she told me. Webb has been using his position to identify and track potential victims. The most disturbing discovery was a detailed map of rest stops along Interstate 5, with notations about which locations had poor cell coverage, minimal security, and limited law enforcement presence. Webb had been studying truckers' patterns, learning habits, identifying vulnerabilities. The real night clerk was found hours later in storage unit 52, tied up, dehydrated but alive. David Park told investigators Webb had been watching the station for weeks, asking questions about the job, customers, security systems, shift schedules. Webb was arrested 3 days later at a truck stop in Nevada, caught tampering with another driver's vehicle. Evidence from his storage unit linked him to at least 12 incidents across 3 states, and 2 attempted kidnappings. I still drive long-haul routes, but I'm more careful about where I stop. I trust my instincts more now and always let someone know exactly where I am. Webb showed me that predators can be anywhere, hiding behind normal jobs and friendly faces. The worst part? He'd been planning this for months, turning a simple gas station into his hunting ground, using the trust drivers have in everyday stops to gather intelligence and identify victims. What's the most unsettling encounter you've had with someone you initially thought was just doing their job? I found a travel companion who meticulously documented our trip at night. I've been a paramedic with Fresno County Emergency Medical Services for 12 years, and I thought I'd seen every type of person you could encounter during long shifts. What happened during a routine patient transport on December 3, 2023, made me realize how dangerous it can be to trust someone just because they wear the same uniform. My name is David Williams, and I work the overnight shift, usually running calls between Fresno and the smaller communities scattered throughout the Central Valley. That night, I was partnered with someone new, a guy named Robert Martinez who just transferred from Los Angeles County. He seemed professional enough during our brief introduction at the start of shift, maybe 45 years old, medium height, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of emergency medical experience. Our supervisor, Captain Jensen, had paired us for a routine inter-facility transport, moving a stable patient from Fresno Community Hospital to a specialized cardiac care facility in Modesto. It was the kind of run that usually takes about 3 hours round trip, an hour and a half each way, plus time for patient handoff and paperwork. Nothing complicated, just a chance for the new guy to learn our protocols and get familiar with the area. We were driving AMR Unit 47, a 2020 Ford Transit ambulance equipped with all the standard life support equipment. Robert had volunteered to drive the first leg, which was fine by me. I could use the time to review the patient's chart and make sure all our equipment was properly stocked and ready. The patient was Margaret Chin, a 73-year-old woman recovering from a minor heart procedure. She was stable, conscious, and in good spirits despite having to make the late-night transfer. Her daughter had arranged for the specialized follow-up care in Modesto, and she was actually looking forward to getting closer to her family during her recovery. We loaded Mrs. Chin into the ambulance at 11:47 p.m., and I settled into the back with her while Robert climbed behind the wheel. The route to Modesto was straightforward, north on Highway 99 for about 90 miles, mostly straight rural highway with light traffic at this hour. As we pulled out of the hospital parking lot, I noticed Robert adjusting something on the dashboard. When I looked closer, I saw he'd mounted a small digital camera on the windshield, positioned to record the road ahead. "What's that for?" I asked through the partition between the patient compartment and cab. "Dash cam," Robert replied. "I like to document my routes, especially at night. Helps with incident reports if anything unusual happens." That seemed reasonable enough. A lot of emergency services were starting to use dash cameras for liability protection and training purposes. I went back to monitoring Mrs. Chin, who was resting comfortably with stable vital signs. About 20 minutes into the trip, somewhere around Merced, I noticed Robert had pulled out his phone and was doing something with it while driving. I could see the screen reflected in the partition glass. He appeared to be taking photos or recording video through the side window. "Everything okay up there?" I called out. "Just documenting some landmarks," Robert said without taking his eyes off his phone. I'm new to this area, so I like to keep track of important locations, hospitals, fire stations, that kind of thing. Again, it seemed like something a thorough professional might do. Learning the territory was important for emergency responders, and having visual references could be helpful during high-stress situations when you need to navigate quickly to unfamiliar locations. But as we continued north, Robert's behavior became more concerning. Every few minutes, he would pull out his phone and take more pictures or video, sometimes slowing down significantly to get better shots of specific buildings or intersections. He was particularly interested in photographing houses that were set back from the road, isolated properties with long driveways and few visible neighbors. Mrs. Chen noticed the erratic driving. Is everything all right, dear? She asked me. The driver seems to be stopping and starting quite a bit. Just being extra careful, I told her, but I was starting to feel uneasy about Robert's behavior. Professional documentation was one thing, but this was becoming excessive and was affecting his driving. Around 12:45 a.m., as we passed through a particularly rural stretch between Turlock and Modesto, Robert suddenly pulled over at a rest area that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. There were no other vehicles around, just a couple of broken picnic tables and a restroom building that looked abandoned. Why are we stopping? I asked. Need to check something on the engine, Robert said, but he was already out of the cab with his phone in hand, walking toward the back of the ambulance. Through the rear windows, I could see him taking extensive photos and video of our ambulance, paying particular attention to the license plate, unit number, and equipment configuration. He spent several minutes documenting every angle of the vehicle, including close-up shots of the medical equipment visible through the windows. Mrs. Chen was getting anxious. What's happening? Why did we stop? Is there a problem with the ambulance? I'm sure it's nothing, I said, but I was reaching for my radio to call dispatch. Something about this whole situation felt very wrong. Before I could key the mic, Robert climbed back into the driver's seat. All good, he said. Just wanted to document this location for future reference. It's a good spot to know about for emergency staging. But as we pulled back onto the highway, I noticed he was now taking photos of every road sign, every mile marker, every overpass we passed under. He was creating a detailed visual record of our exact route, timing, and location, information that would be extremely valuable for someone planning illegal activities along this corridor. I started paying closer attention to what Robert was photographing. He showed particular interest in locations that would be vulnerable to crime, isolated truck stops, houses with no nearby neighbors, areas with poor lighting and limited visibility from the road. He was especially focused on documenting any security cameras or law enforcement presence, taking note of their positions and coverage areas. Robert, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, what exactly are you planning to do with all these photos? Just building a comprehensive area resource guide, he replied. You'd be surprised how useful detailed visual documentation can be for emergency response planning. But the way he said it didn't sound like standard emergency preparedness. There was something calculating about his approach, something that suggested these photos were intended for purposes that had nothing to do with saving lives. As we approached Modesto, Robert pulled out a notebook and started writing down specific details about our route, exact times we passed certain landmarks, traffic patterns, locations of police patrol areas, gaps in cellular coverage. He was creating a detailed intelligence report about the vulnerabilities and opportunities along this highway corridor. We arrived at the Modesto Cardiac Facility at 1:52 a.m., and I was relieved to get Mrs. Chen safely delivered to the receiving staff. But my relief was short-lived when I saw what Robert was doing during the patient handoff. While I was busy transferring Mrs. Chen and completing the medical paperwork, Robert was photographing the hospital's security setup, entrance locations, camera positions, staff parking areas, shift change procedures. He was paying particular attention to documenting which entrances were monitored and which appeared to have limited security coverage. Robert, I said as we finished the patient transfer, I need to talk to you about something. Sure, he said, but he was still taking photos of the hospital's parking structure. Just give me a minute to finish documenting this facility layout. That's when I realized what was really happening. Robert wasn't building an emergency response resource guide, he was conducting surveillance. The photos, the notes, the detailed route documentation, the interest in security cameras and law enforcement presence. This was intelligence gathering for criminal purposes. I pretended to check something on the ambulance while I called dispatch on my portable radio, using low tones so Robert couldn't overhear. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need a supervisor to meet us at our current location for a personnel issue. Copy, Unit 47. What's the nature of the issue? I'll explain when they arrive. Just need someone here as soon as possible. Supervisor Williams arrived 20 minutes later, and I explained the situation away from Robert. Williams took it seriously and called for backup from the Modesto Police Department to assist with what was potentially a criminal investigation. When officers arrived and began questioning Robert about his activities, his story started falling apart immediately. The Area Resource Guide he claimed to be building was actually a detailed criminal intelligence file. His notebook contained specific information about vulnerable locations, security gaps, patrol schedules, and optimal timing for criminal activities. The photos on his phone revealed the true scope of his operation. He had similar documentation from dozens of routes throughout Central California, all focused on identifying opportunities for robbery, burglary, and worse. The ambulance runs were just a cover story. He was using his position in emergency services to conduct reconnaissance for a criminal organization. Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Modesto Police Department told me later that Robert Martinez wasn't even his real name. He was actually Thomas Wayne Mitchell, with outstanding warrants in 3 states for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges related to organized crime activities. He's been using stolen credentials to get jobs in emergency services, Rodriguez explained. The ambulance uniform and medical credentials give him access to locations and information that would be impossible for regular criminals to obtain. The investigation revealed that Mitchell had been working with a larger criminal network that specialized in targeting rural communities and isolated businesses along highway corridors. His job was to identify vulnerable targets and provide detailed intelligence about security measures, response times, and optimal timing for criminal activities. The photos and notes he'd collected during our transport run were already being used to plan specific crimes. 3 businesses along our route had been burglarized in the weeks following Mitchell's reconnaissance, and investigators found that the criminals had detailed knowledge of security camera positions, alarm systems, and law enforcement patrol schedules that could only have come from Mitchell's surveillance work. Mrs. Chin, our patient that night, became an inadvertent victim when Mitchell used information from her medical records to identify her home address and financial information. Fortunately, we caught him before he could pass that information along to his criminal associates, but the violation of her privacy and safety was deeply disturbing. The real Robert Martinez, whose identity Mitchell had stolen, was found tied up in a storage unit in Fresno. He'd been missing for 6 days while Mitchell used his credentials and assumed his identity. The real Martinez was dehydrated and traumatized but alive. Mitchell was arrested and charged with identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and several counts related to the burglaries that had been carried out using his intelligence. The evidence from his phone and notebook linked him to criminal activity across multiple counties, and federal authorities took over the case due to the interstate nature of the conspiracy. I testified at Mitchell's trial about that night's events and the systematic nature of his intelligence gathering. The defense tried to argue that he was just a thorough professional documenting his work environment, but the evidence was overwhelming. The photos, notes, and criminal activities that followed his reconnaissance missions painted a clear picture of organized criminal conspiracy. Mitchell was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, but the damage was already done. The criminal network he'd been feeding information to had used his intelligence to carry out dozens of crimes across Central California, targeting businesses and individuals who had no idea they were being surveilled by someone in a uniform they trusted. I still work as a paramedic, but I'm much more careful about who I trust, even among my colleagues. Mitchell showed me that criminals can infiltrate any profession, using the trust and access that comes with emergency services credentials to gather information for illegal purposes. The incident also changed how our department handles new personnel. We now have more thorough background checks, regular supervision during probationary periods, and policies about documentation and photography that prevent someone from using their position for unauthorized surveillance. The most disturbing part was realizing how much damage one person could do by exploiting the trust that communities place in emergency responders. Mitchell had access to people's homes, medical information, financial details, and personal vulnerabilities, information that he systematically collected and sold to criminals who used it to cause real harm to innocent people. What's the most suspicious behavior you've witnessed from someone in a position of trust? During a night trip, a black pickup truck started following me. I've been working as a night security supervisor for Allied Protection Services for 6 years, and I thought I understood how surveillance and security operations worked. What happened on January 18, 2024, during a routine patrol shift in Springfield, Illinois, showed me how technology can be used to monitor people in ways that cross every line of privacy and safety. My name is Jennifer Garcia, and I supervise security operations for a chain of industrial facilities scattered across 3 counties in central Illinois. Most of my work involves driving between different sites during overnight hours, checking on security guards, responding to alarms, and ensuring all facilities are properly secured. It's usually quiet work, driving dark rural roads between warehouses, manufacturing plants, and distribution centers. That night, I was driving my company vehicle, a 2021 silver Chevrolet Tahoe equipped with radio equipment, emergency lights, and basic security gear. My route covered 7 different facilities spread across roughly 120 miles of territory, mostly connected by state highways and county roads that see very little traffic after midnight. I started my shift at 10 p.m. from our main office in Springfield, planning to make the complete circuit and return by 6 a.m. The first 3 stops went normally: a paper mill in Riverton, a grain processing facility near Petersburg, and a logistics center in Mason. All secure, all guards present and accounted for, no unusual activity reported. It was around 1:15 a.m., driving north on Route 97 between Mason and Havana, when I first noticed the black pickup truck. The road was completely empty except for my Tahoe, and this vehicle that had appeared in my rearview mirror maybe a quarter mile back. At first, I didn't think much of it. Plenty of people work night shifts and travel these roads during off hours. But as I continued driving, I realized the pickup was maintaining a precise distance behind me. When I sped up, it sped up. When I slowed down for curves or small towns, it slowed down proportionally. It wasn't trying to pass or fall behind, it was deliberately matching my speed and following distance. The pickup appeared to be a newer model Chevrolet Silverado, dark-colored with tinted windows that made it impossible to see inside. No front license plate that I could make out, and the headlights were positioned in a way that created glare in my mirrors, making it difficult to get a clear view of the vehicle details. I decided to test whether this was coincidental or deliberate. At the next intersection, instead of continuing straight toward my 4th facility, I made an unplanned right turn onto County Road 12, a smaller road that led away from my normal route. The pickup truck followed immediately, making the same turn without hesitation. Now I was certain I was being followed, but I wasn't sure why. My security company uniform and vehicle were clearly marked, so it wasn't like I was trying to hide my identity or purpose. I considered calling dispatch, but I wanted to gather more information first about who was following me and what their intentions might be. I made another test turn, this time onto a dead-end road that led to an abandoned grain elevator. The pickup followed again, but this time it stopped about 200 yards behind me when I reached the end of the road. I sat there for about 3 minutes, watching in my mirrors, but the pickup just waited. No one got out, no lights flashed, no attempt to approach or communicate. When I backed up and headed back toward the main road, the pickup fell in behind me again at the same precise distance. Whatever this was, it was systematic and professional. This wasn't road rage or random criminal behavior, Someone was conducting organized surveillance of my movements. I continued toward my fourth stop, a manufacturing plant in Havana, with the pickup maintaining its position behind me. As I pulled into the facility parking lot, the pickup drove past without stopping, but I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Mounted on the roof of the truck, barely visible in the darkness, was some kind of electronic equipment, antennas, cameras, or sensors that definitely weren't standard automotive equipment. I completed my security check at the Havana facility quickly, spending only about 10 minutes inside to verify the overnight guard was present and all systems were functioning normally. When I came back outside, the black pickup was parked across the street from the facility entrance, engine running, waiting for me. As soon as I pulled out of the parking lot, the pickup resumed its following position. But now I was noticing additional details that were deeply disturbing. The vehicle seemed to be scanning or recording everything around it. I could see faint electronic displays glowing inside the cab, and there were definitely multiple cameras and sensors mounted in various positions on the truck. At my fifth stop, a distribution center in Lewistown, the same pattern repeated. The pickup waited outside while I conducted my security check, then resumed following when I left. But this time, I saw something else that confirmed my worst fears about what was happening. As I was walking back to my Tahoe, I noticed a small electronic device attached to my rear bumper that definitely hadn't been there when I started my shift. It was about the size of a deck of cards, with a small antenna and what looked like a GPS tracking beacon. Someone had planted a tracking device on my vehicle while I was inside the facility. I left the device in place, not wanting to alert whoever was monitoring it that I'd discovered their surveillance operation. But I immediately called my supervisor, Captain Martinez, to report what was happening. "Jennifer, where are you right now?" Martinez asked after I explained the situation. "Just leaving the Lewistown facility. The pickup is still following me, maintaining about a quarter-mile distance. I've confirmed they've placed a tracking device on my vehicle. Do not attempt to confront or approach this vehicle," Martinez said. "I'm calling Illinois State Police and requesting immediate assistance. Continue your normal route for now, but stay on the radio." "Copy that." "Should I remove the tracking device?" "Negative. Leave it in place until law enforcement arrives. We don't want to escalate this situation if we don't understand what we're dealing with." I continued toward my sixth facility, an agricultural equipment warehouse near Canton, with the pickup still following and ISP dispatch coordinating with Captain Martinez to intercept the surveillance operation. But what happened next showed me that this was much bigger than simple criminal stalking. As I approached Canton, I noticed I wasn't just being followed by one vehicle anymore. A second black pickup, identical to the first, had joined the surveillance from a side road. Now I had two vehicles tracking my movements, positioned to maintain visual contact from multiple angles. The coordination between the two vehicles was clearly professional. They communicated with each other, alternating which one maintained close following distance, and which one hung back or took parallel routes. This was the kind of sophisticated surveillance typically used by law enforcement or intelligence agencies, not common criminals. I keyed my radio. "Captain Martinez, I now have two identical black pickups conducting coordinated surveillance. This is definitely not random criminal activity." "Copy that, Jennifer. ISP units are en route to your location. ETA approximately 15 minutes. Continue normal operations and avoid any actions that might provoke a confrontation." But as I pulled into the Canton facility, something even more disturbing happened. Both pickup trucks drove past the entrance, but instead of parking and waiting like before, they disappeared completely. No headlights visible on any of the surrounding roads, no sign of where they'd gone. I completed my security check as quickly as possible, but when I came back outside, I found Illinois State Police Trooper Davis waiting by my vehicle along with another ISP unit that had just arrived. "Ms. Garcia? I'm Trooper Davis. We need to examine your vehicle and get a full report on what you've observed tonight." Davis and his partner, Trooper Wilson, spent 20 minutes documenting the tracking device and searching my Tahoe for any additional surveillance equipment. What they found was disturbing, not just the GPS tracker, but also a small listening device that had been planted inside my vehicle, probably while I was conducting security checks at the various facilities. Someone has been monitoring your location and conversations, Davis told me. This is sophisticated equipment, not something you'd buy at an electronics store. We're dealing with a professional surveillance operation. While the troopers were processing the evidence, Captain Martinez arrived with 2 other Allied protection supervisors. He'd been coordinating with ISP dispatch and had learned some information that explained what we were dealing with. Jennifer, we've been getting reports from security companies across 3 states about similar surveillance activities, Martinez said. Black pickup trucks following security personnel, planting tracking devices, conducting systematic intelligence gathering on security operations. Trooper Wilson had been running the license plate numbers from the surveillance footage that ISP had gathered from traffic cameras along my route. We've identified the vehicles, but they're registered to a company that doesn't exist. The addresses are fake, the business licenses are fraudulent. Someone is using sophisticated identity theft to cover their tracks. The investigation that followed revealed the scope of what had been happening. A criminal organization had been conducting systematic surveillance of security companies, private investigators, and law enforcement personnel across the Midwest. Their goal was to identify patterns, vulnerabilities, and opportunities for large-scale criminal operations. The black pickup trucks were mobile surveillance platforms, equipped with high-end cameras, electronic monitoring equipment, GPS tracking systems, and communication gear that allowed them to coordinate with other vehicles and a central command center. They could track multiple targets simultaneously, monitor radio communications, and build detailed intelligence profiles of security operations. Detective Sarah Johnson from the Illinois State Police Criminal Intelligence Division took over the case. This organization has been mapping security procedures, response times, patrol routes, and personnel schedules for dozens of companies across multiple states. She told me during my formal interview. They're building a comprehensive intelligence database for planning major crimes. The tracking and listening devices planted on my vehicle had been transmitting data to a central server that was collecting information about Allied Protection's operations, client locations, security procedures, and response protocols. Similar surveillance had been conducted against police departments, sheriff's offices, and private security companies throughout Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri. 3 weeks later, the FBI raided a warehouse complex in East St. Louis and arrested 12 people involved in the surveillance operation. The facility contained sophisticated electronic monitoring equipment, detailed maps and intelligence files on hundreds of security targets, and evidence of planned criminal operations against banks, jewelry stores, and high-value cargo shipments. The criminal organization had been using the surveillance intelligence to identify optimal targets and timing for major heists. They knew when security patrols would be in specific areas, how long response times would be, what communication frequencies were used, and where the gaps in coverage existed. My surveillance had been part of their preparation for targeting several of the facilities on my patrol route. They'd identified the grain processing plant near Petersburg as containing valuable equipment and minimal security during overnight hours. The tracking data they'd collected would have allowed them to time their operation to avoid my security checks. The case went federal because of the interstate nature of the surveillance operation and the sophisticated technology involved. The FBI's investigation revealed connections to organized crime groups that were using the intelligence to plan and execute high-value thefts across multiple states. I testified at the federal trial about the night I was followed and the systematic nature of the surveillance I'd observed. The defense tried to argue that the surveillance was legal private investigation work, but the evidence of criminal planning and the sophisticated nature of the equipment made it clear this was organized criminal activity. The main organizer, a man named Marcus Webb, no relation to the gas station incident, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for conspiracy, wire fraud, and racketeering charges. The other members of the organization received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. I still work in security, but the incident changed how I approach my job. I'm much more aware of surveillance. I vary my routes and timing randomly, and I report any suspicious vehicle activity immediately. Allied Protection implemented new security protocols for all personnel, including counter-surveillance training and encrypted communications systems. The most disturbing aspect was realizing how vulnerable security operations can be to systematic surveillance. The criminals had turned our own security procedures against us, using our predictable patterns and professional responsibilities to gather intelligence for their criminal operations. The technology they used was sophisticated enough to monitor multiple targets simultaneously and build comprehensive intelligence profiles that could be used to plan crimes with minimal risk of detection. It showed me that organized crime has access to surveillance capabilities that rival those of law enforcement agencies. What's the most sophisticated surveillance or tracking you've ever noticed being conducted against you? During the night drive, every car flashed its headlights at me. I've been working as a detective with the Stockton Police Department for 9 years, and I thought I understood how federal operations worked. What happened on February 8, 2024, during what should have been a routine drive home from a late case review, showed me how the FBI conducts surveillance operations that involve entire communities without anyone realizing what's happening. My name is Robert Thompson, and I work Major Crimes Division, usually handling robbery, burglary, and occasionally assisting with federal task force operations. That night, I'd been at the department until nearly 11 p.m., reviewing case files for a series of armed robberies that had been plaguing the Central Valley. The cases were potentially connected to organized crime, so we'd been coordinating with federal authorities, but nothing had seemed urgent enough to keep me there past normal hours. I was driving my personal vehicle, a 2022 red Ford Explorer, taking my usual route home through the residential areas of North Stockton. It's about a 20-minute drive from headquarters to my house, mostly through quiet neighborhoods with light traffic during late evening hours. Nothing unusual, just the same streets I'd driven hundreds of times over the years. The first car that flashed its headlights at me was a white Toyota Camry coming from the opposite direction on Pacific Avenue. 2 quick flashes, the kind drivers sometimes use to warn about speed traps or road hazards ahead. I checked my speedometer. I was doing exactly the speed limit, and looked ahead for any obvious problems. No construction, no accidents, no police activity visible. About 3 blocks later, a dark blue Honda Accord coming toward me did the same thing. 2 quick headlight flashes, then continued past normally. Then a silver Nissan Altima. Then a black Chevrolet Malibu. Every single vehicle I encountered was flashing their headlights at me in the exact same pattern. After the 6th or 7th car, I realized this wasn't coincidental. These drivers were coordinating somehow, all giving me the same signal for a specific reason. But I couldn't figure out what they were trying to communicate. My headlights were working properly. I wasn't driving erratically. There were no obvious problems with my vehicle. I pulled over at a gas station and walked around my Explorer, checking for anything that might cause other drivers to signal me. Tires were fine, no visible damage, license plates secure, nothing hanging from the vehicle. I even checked my cell phone to see if there were any emergency alerts about road conditions or police activity, but there was nothing. When I got back on the road, the headlight flashing continued. Every single vehicle I encountered, cars, trucks, SUVs, even a motorcycle, gave me the same 2-flash signal. It was systematic, consistent, and clearly coordinated. Someone was organizing this communication, but I had no idea who or why. I decided to test something. Instead of continuing straight toward my house, I made an unplanned turn onto a different route, heading east instead of north. Within 2 blocks, cars on this new route were also flashing their headlights at me. Whatever this was, it wasn't limited to one specific area or road. I pulled out my phone and called my partner, Detective Lisa Martinez, who lived in a different part of town. Lisa, this is going to sound strange, but are you getting any weird signals from other drivers tonight? What kind of signals? She asked. Headlight flashes. Every car I've encountered in the past 20 minutes has flashed their headlights at me. It's like they're all trying to tell me something. That is strange. Where are you right now? I gave her my location, and she said she'd drive over to meet me and see what was happening. But before she could get there, something even more unusual occurred. A Stockton police patrol unit, one of our own officers, drove past me and also flashed his headlights in the same pattern. That's when I knew this was official law enforcement activity. Our own officers don't flash headlights at fellow cops unless there's a specific operational reason. I immediately called dispatch on my cell phone. "This is Detective Thompson, badge 2847. I'm off duty, driving my personal vehicle, and I'm getting coordinated headlight signals from multiple vehicles including one of our patrol units. What's going on?" The dispatcher, Sarah Williams, who I'd worked with for years, sounded hesitant. "Detective Thompson, I need you to hold on the line while I check with a supervisor." I waited about 2 minutes before Sergeant Davis came on the line. "Bob, where are you right now?" "Driving north on El Dorado Street, approaching the Hammer Lane intersection." "Dave, what's happening?" "Every car in the city is flashing their headlights at me. I need you to continue driving normally and come directly to the station. Don't stop anywhere else, don't get out of your vehicle, just come straight here." "Is there a threat? Am I in danger?" "Just come to the station, Bob. I'll explain when you get here." The drive to the police station was surreal. Every single vehicle I encountered continued flashing their headlights, but now I was also noticing other patterns. The drivers weren't just giving me random signals, they were positioned at specific intervals, almost like they were tracking my movement and reporting my location to someone else. I also started noticing that many of the vehicles had additional occupants. Cars that would normally have one person during late evening hours had 2 or 3 people inside. Some had passengers who appeared to be using radios or cell phones, like they were coordinating with a central command. When I arrived at the Stockton Police Department, Sergeant Davis was waiting in the parking lot along with 2 people I didn't recognize, a man and woman in business suits who looked like federal agents. They approached my vehicle before I could even get out. "Detective Thompson, I'm Special Agent Jennifer Rodriguez, FBI," the woman said, showing her credentials. "This is Special Agent Michael Chin. We need to talk to you immediately about a federal operation that's been compromised." "Compromised how?" I asked. "What does this have to do with cars flashing their headlights?" "The headlight signals were an emergency protocol," Agent Chin explained. "We've been conducting a major surveillance operation in this area, and your presence threatened to compromise the safety of undercover agents and civilian assets." Agent Rodriguez led me into the station, where they'd set up a temporary command center in one of our conference rooms. Multiple computer screens showed maps of Stockton with moving dots representing vehicle positions, radio equipment was monitoring multiple frequencies, and several FBI personnel were coordinating what appeared to be a complex multi-agency operation. "Detective Thompson, are you familiar with the armed robbery cases your department has been investigating?" Rodriguez asked. "Of course. I've been working those cases for the past 3 months. We think they're connected to organized crime, possibly involving suspects from out of state." "They are connected to organized crime," Chin said. "Specifically, they're connected to a criminal organization that we've been investigating for 2 years. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of that investigation. We were planning to arrest the entire network during a planned meeting." Rodriguez showed me a surveillance photo taken earlier that evening. "This is your vehicle, leaving the police station at 11:17 p.m. The problem is that one of the suspects in the criminal organization is your exact physical description, same height, weight, hair color, and he drives a red Ford Explorer identical to yours." The implications hit me immediately. The criminals were expecting their associate to drive from the police station tonight? "Exactly," Chin said. "We had intelligence that someone inside law enforcement was providing information to the criminal organization. When you left the station at the exact time and in the exact vehicle we were expecting, our surveillance teams thought you were the suspect we'd been tracking. The headlight flashing had been an emergency communication system. FBI agents and cooperating local law enforcement had been using the signals to warn each other that a suspected criminal was moving through the area, allowing them to track my location and coordinate their response. But here's the problem," Rodriguez continued. "When our teams realized you weren't the suspect we were expecting, we had to activate emergency protocols to prevent you from accidentally interfering with the operation. The criminal meeting was scheduled to take place in the same area where you were driving home. Agent Chin showed me a detailed map of my neighborhood. The criminal organization was planning to meet at a warehouse about 6 blocks from your house. If you had continued on your normal route, you would have driven directly through their security perimeter. They have armed lookouts, sophisticated surveillance equipment, and they would have assumed you were law enforcement conducting counter-surveillance. The FBI operation involved over 40 agents, multiple surveillance teams, and coordination with local law enforcement agencies across 3 counties. They'd been tracking the criminal organization for months, waiting for an opportunity to arrest the entire network during a single operation. The armed robberies your department has been investigating were just the beginning, Rodriguez explained. This organization has been planning a major heist. They're targeting the Federal Reserve cash processing facility in Sacramento. Tonight's meeting was their final planning session before the operation. The headlight signals had been a way for FBI surveillance teams to communicate my location without using radio transmissions that the criminals might intercept. Every vehicle that flashed their lights was either an undercover agent or a civilian asset who had been recruited to assist with the operation. We had to quickly coordinate with dozens of people to track your movement and make sure you didn't accidentally compromise 2 years of investigation, Chin said. The headlight signals allowed us to guide you away from the operational area without alerting the criminal suspects. While we were talking, the FBI operation was continuing. Radio chatter from the command center indicated that the criminal meeting was proceeding as planned, with suspects arriving at the warehouse location. The FBI was preparing to move in for arrests once all the key players were in position. Detective Thompson, we need you to stay here until the operation is complete, Rodriguez said. Your accidental involvement created some complications, but we've managed to maintain operational security. However, we can't risk any additional interference. Over the next 3 hours, I watched the FBI coordinate one of the most sophisticated criminal takedowns I'd ever seen. They arrested 12 suspects involved in the robbery network, seized multiple weapons, recovered stolen property from previous crimes, and gathered evidence of the planned Federal Reserve heist. The criminal organization had been much larger than we'd realized during our local investigation. They had connections to organized crime groups in multiple states, sophisticated surveillance capabilities, and detailed intelligence about law enforcement operations in the Central Valley. The person they'd expected to see driving my vehicle was Detective Marcus Webb, a different Marcus Webb from previous cases, who had been providing inside information to the criminal organization for over a year. Webb had been arrested earlier that evening at his home, just before I left the police station. Webb was supposed to deliver final intelligence about police patrol schedules and response protocols. Agent Chin explained. When you left the station at the same time, driving the same vehicle, our surveillance teams thought Webb had somehow evaded arrest and was proceeding with the criminal operation. The FBI had been monitoring Webb for months, allowing him to continue his activities while they built a comprehensive case against the entire criminal network. They'd used his communications with the criminals to identify other suspects and gather evidence about planned crimes. Your department's investigation of the armed robberies actually helped us identify additional suspects, Rodriguez said. The casework you and Detective Martinez did provided crucial evidence that we used to build our federal prosecution. The legal proceedings took almost a year to complete. The 12 suspects arrested that night were charged with federal crimes including racketeering, conspiracy, armed robbery, and planning to rob a federal facility. Webb was charged with corruption, conspiracy, and providing material support to a criminal organization. I testified at the federal trial about the night of the operation and the investigation work we'd done on the local robbery cases. The defense tried to argue that the surveillance operation was illegal and violated the suspect's constitutional rights, but the evidence was overwhelming. The main organizer of the criminal network was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The other suspects received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. Webb was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison and lost his law enforcement pension and benefits. The incident changed how federal agencies coordinate with local law enforcement during major operations. The FBI implemented new protocols to prevent accidental interference from uninformed local officers, and they established better communication procedures for emergency situations. I still work Major Crimes Division, but now I'm also assigned to a federal task force that focuses on organized crime investigations. The experience showed me how sophisticated criminal organizations can be and how much coordination is required to investigate them effectively. The most disturbing aspect was learning that Webb had been compromising our investigations for over a year. Cases we thought we were building independently were actually being monitored by the criminals through information Webb provided. They knew our strategies, our evidence, and our planned operations. The FBI's investigation revealed that Webb had provided information that allowed criminals to evade arrest in at least 6 different cases. His corruption had put other officers at risk and allowed dangerous criminals to continue operating in our community. What's the most complex law enforcement operation you've ever witnessed or been inadvertently involved in? Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.